I'm Anthony. This is my book talk project on 1984, which is a dystopian fiction novel by George Orwell. So to summarize 1984, I'm not going to spoil anything major. 1984 is a novel which takes place in a theoretical future where the world is ruled by three totalitarian countries. The book takes place in the country Oceania. In this country, they have to obey the ruling party, which controls the state. They also have to obey central the central figure of the state, which is known as Big Brother. Now, this figure is not a literal figure, but it's kind of more of a metaphorical figure to represent all of their beliefs. You may have heard of the phrase "Big Brother is watching you." That is where this phrase comes from. This book. Now, the plot of the book centers around a character Wilson, who's ideologically opposed to both Big Brother and the totalitarian government. But he needs to remain careful. He can't let anyone know of this because it's actually a crime, the totalitarian government, to be opposed to Big Brother. So essentially, Winston then goes to the novel trying to discover more about Oceania and its motives for doing what it does, while also trying not to get caught and trying not to get tortured. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting setup, I'd say. I would dive further, but of course, you're not allowed to spoil the book. So the first theme is how totalitarian governments remain in power. So this book is not afraid to talk about totalitarian governments. It's basically like the whole book. So if you don't like that, don't read it. But one of the main topics they cover is propaganda. In this book, they use like propaganda to tear families apart. Um, that way, the little kids will like confiscate their dads and moms who are traitors to the government. And they also use propaganda to fuel war, war hate and stuff. Kind of similar. I mean, most countries use propaganda to support their side of the war, but especially in this novel, they use it a lot. A lot of war propaganda is used, and this kind of focuses the attention away from domestic issues and more towards foreign issues, which help distract the population and help the totalitarian government war hate and stuff. Kind of similar. I mean, most countries use propaganda to support their side of the war, but especially in this novel, they use it a lot. A lot of war propaganda is used, and this kind of focuses the attention away from domestic issues and more towards foreign issues, which help distract the population and help the totalitarian government remain in power. Another way totalitarian governments remain in power in this book is through vocabulary. They dumb down the vocabulary, which is kind of interesting, for the idea of limiting the complexity of thought, I guess. So by making their citizens dumber, they're going to be less likely to rebel, basically, which I don't know if that's how it works. Maybe it does. It's kind of an interesting thought at the very least, though. The third way that in this book, how the totalitarian government remains in power, is through terror, and this is pretty self-explanatory. Secret police, brute force, torture, methods like that, where to install a sense of fear. You don't want to start an uprising because you're afraid you're going to get tortured by the secret police. But this theme is actually pretty interesting because there's not just one way totalitarian governments remain in power. There's like a lot of different ways for how totalitarian governments will remain in power, making it kind of nuanced. There's more even that I didn't touch on, but anyways. Another theme is past, future, and present. So there's a quote in the book: "He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past." So this theme is actually explored on quite a bit. Essentially, in the book, they oftentimes rewrite history to fit their needs. So if a country is at war with another country, let's say Oceania is at war with another country, they rewrite history so that they have always been at war with that country. Um, And then by rewriting that history, they can essentially control the future and control the thoughts of the population. Um, Joseph Stalin actually kind of did this a little bit. He oftentimes rewrote history. Um, Hitler was actually the opposite, though. He he just burned the history he didn't like. Joseph Stalin rewrote it, but Hitler would just burn like Jewish history books. He didn't bother rewriting it, which actually turned out worse for him. But another thing is the present defines the past. Same thing we're kind of touching up on. Education is actually an interesting example of this in real life. So, for example, like Columbus. Um, Columbus was viewed as a hero because he was taught as a hero. The past was taught painted Columbus in a good light, but now we kind of paint Columbus in a more negative light, showcasing well, actually, he wasn't so much of a hero. He did some bad things, especially to the Native Americans and stuff. So now we don't like view him as much of a hero. The past is painted more grimly on Columbus, and because of that, we don't view him as much of a hero. And to an extension, we don't view colonialism as like a good thing anymore. Like in the past, colonialism was viewed as like a way to educate the savages and whatnot. But now colonialism is not looked in such a positive light, and because of that, it may impact our future. So this quote, not only is it very relevant to the book and how this totalitarian government will often rewrite history, but it's also pretty relevant to the real world as well. Sorry, let me catch my breath. Okay. Rhetorical devices, foreshadowing. So this book has a lot of foreshadowing. One of the best parts of foreshadowing is we shall meet at the place where there is no darkness. Right? So essentially Winston dreams this up. He dreams that another character, O'Brien, is telling him this. And this actually foreshadows where they meet. Which is really cool. There we go. This line from a dream Winston has foreshadows where he and another character, O'Brien, meet up. It relates to the past, present, and future theme, as this phrase from the present encourages Winston to go meet up with O'Brien in the future, illustrating how the present and past control him and others alike. Now, I could go into depth as to what this foreshadows, but I don't want to spoil the book, so for now I'm just going to keep it like that. Overall, it's a good moment though. So one text to world connection I have is what 1984 tells us about the world. So 1984 is a great example of how totalitarian governments remain in power. It covers a lot of things, like propaganda, a big one, and then also the brute force. Some of the things I thought were a little goofy, like the dumbing down of vocabulary. I don't think totalitarian governments necessarily do that. Maybe. Um, but in general, for the most part, it does give us a good view of how totalitarian governments actually work and how they remain in power. Um, it also kind of gives us insights of the people's perspective in the 20th century. As of course this was written in the 20th century, it can kind of show us what people thought back then and whatnot. My overall thoughts of this book is that my overall thoughts on this book is that it's pretty good, but it's not for everyone. My overall thoughts on this book is that it's pretty good, but it's not for everyone. I think in order to enjoy this book, you're probably gonna have to be. You're probably either gonna have to. I think that in order to enjoy this book, you're probably gonna have to find dystopian societies to be really cool, or politics to be really cool. If you don't care about either, then you're probably not gonna enjoy it that much. That being said, the audiobook is very good. It's probably the best audiobook I've ever listened to. Um, it's right down here, 1984 by George Orwell, read by Steve Parker. It's a great audiobook. Has a lot of immersive sound effects. Really good. And yeah, that's it. Thank you. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.